by Amnesty International has highlighted that thousands of South Sudanese women and girls and some men who have been raped in ethnically charged sexual attacks in the ongoing conflict are battling mental distress and stigma with nowhere to turn for help. Now, the report released Thursday reveals aggravated acts of sexual violence against thousands of people across the country since hostilities began in December 2013. Now, survivors interviewed jointly by Amnesty and 10 South Sudanese human rights defenders claim the perpetrators came from both sides of the conflict, pitting the government forces of President Salva Kiir and forces of the former Vice President Riek Machar, who is on the run in South Africa. They interviewed 168 victims of sexual violence, including 16 men in towns and villages across 4 states in South Sudan, which are Central, Equatorial, Jonglei, Upper Nile and Unity, as well as in 3 refugee settlements in northern Uganda. Now, joining me in studio tonight is Michelle Kagari. She is the Deputy Regional Director of Amnesty International. It's an organization that released that shocking report from South Sudan. Good evening, Michelle. From that report, clearly it's indicated that these perpetrators come from both the 2 main factions, that is Salva Kiir as well as Riek Machar. There are also new other factions coming up. Will this further complicate matters?
Actually, what we did find is that civilians, whenever civilians come in close proximity of armed actors, irrespective of where the armed actors are affiliated, there will be some sexual violence. So we had incidents of government forces targeting the opposition or people perceived in the opposition and vice versa. But also with the different factions that are coming up, there's also sexual violence. It's widespread. It is endemic. It's been a feature of the conflict since it started in 2013.
Reports that Juba, one of the main cities there, is pretty much peaceful. So are these atrocities committed in the interior compared to these urban areas?
Every time that there is fighting, like I said, whenever civilians come in close proximity with armed actors, sexual violence is one of the features. So you will recall that when fighting broke out in Juba last year, there was widespread sexual violence, including in close proximity to the POC camps within Juba. We had the case of the sexual violence that was perpetrated against residents who are staying at the Terrain Hotel. The trial is currently ongoing. So this is something that has happened, and the survivors of sexual violence, it doesn't end after the violence has ended. They have repercussions. They're experiencing trauma. They're experiencing physical injuries. We documented cases of women who had been gang raped, who had lost their fetuses, are suffering from fistula. Others have got injuries on their backs, and these still prevail.
And there are also men from the report that who have been affected as well.
Yes, we have found that there is quite a gendered element to sexual violence. It's definitely premeditated. It is intended to terrorize. When men and boys are being targeted, it is being targeted as a way to cut off the linear or the line of that particular group, because South Sudan is a patriarchal society. And certainly what we have seen, for example, is that in the POC camps, women will elect to go outside the camps looking for food, knowing that their risk of being targeted for rape or abduction for sexual slavery is very high, because if the men leave the camps, they will be killed.
It is a very shocking report there. Now, Michelle, one final question. The observers who say that South Sudan's situation has been forgotten or has been neglected by the international community, with this kind of reports coming out of this country, which is, of course, the youngest nation in Africa, do you think there is need for the international community to once again focus on South Sudan?
Well, South Sudan is still on the agenda. What has been happening is that there has been a political impasse. The AU and IGAD has been trying to revitalize the peace process. The agreement that was signed and which was broken when the July fighting resumed last year needs to get back on track. But certainly the international community and Africans, we cannot let this up. You know, we need to keep the pressure on the president. We need to ensure ensure that this is permanently on the agenda. Africans need to be asking questions. We need to be saying something has to be done. And UNMISS also needs to be taking measures to ensure that they are doing all that they can to reduce incidents of sexual violence. The government needs to make sure it's doing all it can to ensure zero policy against sexual violence within its ranks.
Of course, it is the hope of everyone that, the crisis there in South Sudan is going to be resolved soon. Many thanks, Michelle, for your input. That is Michelle Kagari, the Deputy Regional Director of Amnesty, talking. Now, let's cross over to Libya, which has returned 100 illegal migrants, mainly from Sudan, back to their home countries. Now, authorities, however, fear that the sub-Saharan Africans deported in a Libyan drive against illegal migrants will probably try to return unless their home countries can be helped to offer them jobs and reintegration. Now, the North African country says it has started deporting illegal immigrants, a community of up to 2 million people, mostly from poor African states, who are trying to reach Europe. Tripoli is under pressure at home to tackle the problem of illegal immigrants, whom officials and locals blame for spreading insecurity and taking jobs from unemployed Libyan youths. It is estimated that Libya deported 4,000 migrants in 2004, just under 60,000 in 2005, and more than 60,000 in 2006. Well, it's about time we cross over to Uganda, I believe, where Uganda members of parliament who are backing the lifting of the presidential age limit say they will not be intimidated by opponents to the change. The upper age limit for how old someone can be to run for president is currently 75. The change will allow President Yoweri Museveni, in power for 31 years, to be a candidate in 2021. Now, the MPs from the governing National Resistance Movement appeared in the grounds of Parliament wearing T-shirts with 75 plus written on the back. The T-shirts were made by the Kick Age Limit Out of the Constitution Youth Group, which is mobilizing for the cause.
NRM legislators headed by Koboko Municipality MP Evelyn Anite vowed not to succumb to pressure by those opposed to the age limit bill because they have support of the army. While speaking to the media, NRM legislators maintained they will table the bill as soon as the discussion about it in the caucus is finalized. The tabling of the age limit bill in Parliament has been postponed to next week as the commotion between legislators in support of it and those opposed to it continues to deepen.
It is supported overwhelmingly.
According to Evelyn Anite, NRM has sufficient support to amend the constitution and come out safe.
You cannot intimidate a ruling party, because if they are looking for support, for us we don't go looking for support. We are the party in government. We have the support of the Majay.
The UPDF will never take sides. Our constitution under Article 208 clearly states that the UPDF shall at all times remain non-partisan, and that's our position.
While speaking to the media, Anita said as NRM legislators, they won't succumb to the intimidation of those opposed to the bill because it is literally abandoning their duty as members of parliament.
Well, and that report from Uganda takes us to a very short break. But when we come back, we'll start over a studio discussion that has everything to do with women leadership in Africa. And we have our guest ready in studio with us, composed of Terry Omondi. She's the FIDA Kenya CEO. Mike Washiro is the Deputy Director, Center for Rights Education and Awareness, as well as Tia Galgalo is the immediate or former Isiolo woman representative. We'll be coming back with that discussion. Don't go too far.